Oh, love and matrimony, the promise of wedded bliss, the finding of one's soulmate, or more important to medieval monarchs, making heirs, and where you can, making peace. Royal unions have a complicated history, partly for their importance to bloodlines and partly because of the extent people went to assure them. Some of the worst wedding nights imaginable went down on royal watch, be it thanks to blind denial of grief, inbreeding, public disasters, homosexual suitors, or even the wrath of witchcraft. Welcome to History on Fleek. Today we examine the 6 worst royal wedding nights in history. Few wedding nights were more disastrous than the night of Louis Ferdinand de Bourbon and Mary Josepha of Saxony. Louis Ferdinand was enjoying the life of a crowned prince as a son to Louis XV, and had acquired a bride of his choosing with Marie Theresa Raphael. The pair were wedded to much adulation in Versailles in 1745, and Louis Ferdinand had fallen quite madly in love. Fate would play a wicked hand though. In the rare instance a royal marriage was between 2 loving parties, it wasn't to last. Barely a year into their marriage, Mary Theresa would pass away just 3 days after giving birth to their daughter at the age of 20. By most accounts, Louis Ferdinand was grief-struck and required being dragged from his wife's deathbed by his father. Grief or not, Louis XV would not have a son without a bride. The king wanted an heir, and an heir with issue. In 1747, Louis Ferdinand was wedded to Maria Josepha of Saxony, much at his father's behest. Yet when it came time to consummate the marriage, the very night of the wedding, matters went rather awry. His grief hadn't been accounted for in securing the line of succession. He spent the wedding night bawling with tears, only reminded of the late wife and marriage he'd lost. On a sweeter note, Maria Josepha took no slight from the disconsolate prince. She supported and heard out the prince's grief. From this, they struck up a genuine bond and went on to have no less than 8 children together. Oh, just about the sweetest arranged marriage story I ever heard. Some royal wedding nights were harbingers of bad weddings more than others. The wedding of Frederick II of Prussia being a clear example. The intermarrying between Austrian and Prussian aristocracy had been long-standing, and both Frederick II and Christine of Brunswick were mere pawns. Much to the indignity of the young Christine, it was nothing short of an open secret that Frederick II was widely regarded as homosexual. His courtiers were all male, and even publicly he showed close to zero interest in women, even as friends. At 17 years old, Christine would marry Frederick II of Prussia in 1733. Though sadly for Christine, this was predominantly a move from Frederick to placate a tyrannical father. Frederick II had communicated to his sister in writing that there would be no friendship or love between the two, and he would threaten suicide to avoid the nuptials. The young Christine's time in the royal court was no doubt lonely and isolating. Her husband and his court didn't want her there, and only his tyrannical father and king supported her presence. When Frederick I would pass away, the two would live increasingly separate lives, revealing the true arranged nature of their union. As for their wedding night, you can be sure there was no consummation. All Frederick could manage was about an hour of conversation before avoiding Christine with a walk outside for the rest of the evening. Ow, rough. Marie Antoinette and Louis XVI would be remembered eternally as the monarchs failed to bring the Republic to France. Yet their marriage is just as fascinating a story. At a time when royal marriages were more a vessel for securing succession lines than declarations of love, both were promised into marriage before coming of age. Born Maria Antonia, daughter to acting Queen of Austria, Marie Antoinette was promised away in marriage before she'd even reached 12 years old. Due to their import and significance, marriages between royal families could take place by proxy, so these two didn't even meet before they were married. Louis was 15 and Marie was 14 when they wedded in 1770 at the Palace of Versailles. No doubt a grand spectacle. There were more than 5,000 guests, and the giant fireworks display would be watched by around 200,000 people. Yet not all was blissful with this royal union. Foreboding signs were visible on the day. There was a giant storm threatening to throw off the entire ceremony and a riot during the fireworks, unfortunately taking the lives of hundreds. Despite a ritual bedding ceremony on the night, that's right, back in the day, wedding guests would follow the couple into the marital bedroom before the act. Apparently, way back, sometimes they didn't leave. Ew. The couple would not consummate the act. They would not produce children for 7 years after the marriage. This lack of consummation would haunt the royal couple for years to come in the eyes of the public, though ironically, it would seemingly deepen their bond and love, particularly when the revolution had them cornered. Some royal wedding nights were more necessity and a lack of options than just avoiding inconvenient truths. Nevertheless, the results could be quite unsightly. Philip IV was King of Spain from 1621 till his death in 1665. He was also King of Portugal for 19 years. He would rule during the 30 Years' War, and a time in which the landmass of the Spanish Empire would see its height, though his ability to be a monarch with issue caused great trouble, or at least trouble doing what was required. Philip would take the hand of his first wife in 1615 when he was just 10 and her 13. Yet the two would be kept apart by courtiers, and Philip would have a litany of mistresses with whom he would have reportedly over 30 children. Philip IV's first marriage to Elizabeth of France did produce its purpose. It tied French and Spanish aristocracy in the name of peace and produced a male heir. Tragically, Elizabeth would die in 1644, and their son Balthasar Charles would die 2 years later at just 16 years old. This left the King of Spain heartbroken, without a wife or issue. Yet emotional realities and painful setbacks be damned, the monarchies of yesteryear had a failsafe: inbreeding. At 44 years old, Philip IV would marry his 14-year-old niece Mariana in 1649. While I have no interest in the gag-inducing details of their consummation or not, the two would produce 5 children, with 2 making it to adulthood. The rest were sickly and/or suffering from recessive genes. Yeah. There's nothing like a royal wedding, though, as we keep seeing here, some can lead to absolute mayhem. The she-wolf of Isabella of France, would marry Edward II on January 5, 1308. Quite improbably, Isabella, daughter of Philip IV of France, would develop a reputation as a femme fatale in the annals of history. To this day, the exact fate of her husband and her potential role in it is anything but settled. A marriage that would no doubt accelerate tensions surrounding the crown of England. The union was somewhat fated before it even reached its wedding night. Edward II was likely for a difficult reign as king. The fourth son of Edward I was unlikely to ever sit on the throne, and his marriage took place as part of a peace treaty. Perhaps more importantly, Edward II never appeared to have much an eye for the ladies. In the years running up to his wedding night, Edward II developed something of an intense bond with a nobleman, Piers Gaveston. In 14th century England, homosexuality was heresy in the eyes of the church, and was something a royal may want to have kept far from public view. Some chronicles declare Edward was in love with Gaveston, yet others claim it was merely close friends, sworn brothers protecting a crown together. Though there are also accounts from the time quite explicitly outlining Edward's appetite for the company of men. No matter what your take is, the wedding sealed a triangle of power and love that Isabella would continually find herself contesting. First, it was dealing with the presence of Piers Gaveston and the constant rumors. Then it was dealing with the presence of Hugh Despenser the Young and constant rumors. 19 years of unfaithful marriage and an affair later, Isabella of France, fair Isabella, would return from a diplomatic mission from France in 1326 and depose her husband. That's one way to annul a marriage. Whether you are royal or not, if you want a wedding night to come off without a hitch, you probably don't want the thing cursed by witches. Back in the 15th century, such superstitions were very much a thing to take seriously. James I would be the monarch to bring a union between the English and the Scottish crowns, and successor to the last Tudor, Elizabeth I. All this lineage, however, would not save him a wedding night fearing the supernatural. His choice of suitor, 14-year-old Princess Anne of Denmark, appeared to have an almighty threat to her life. After a ceremony of proxy marriage in Copenhagen, the young Anne set sail to Scotland to arrive in Edinburgh and marry James. This did not happen. What should have been a 10-day sail went awry. James would only be greeted by a lost member of the fleet who would come ashore at Leith. The queen-to-be was caught in a storm that was a threat to her very life. James was supposedly so terrified at the news he began fasting and made calls for public prayer. Now, to be clear, Anne safely returned to Norway, and quite romantically, a month later, James would sail to Oslo, where they would marry on November the 23rd, 1589. As for the great storm that had put his wife's life in danger, James, a witchcraft enthusiast, following a visit to Denmark, had one idea. It was the witches that did it. During a stay in Copenhagen, James would be informed 2 women had been found guilty of creating the storm that threatened the Queen. Both women were executed. Just a year later, in 1590, Scottish and Danish nobility would meet to discuss threats against the crown from witchcraft. 4 further women were trialed in Denmark for raising the ocean against the Queen. This in turn led to widespread witch trials that Shakespeare would use as inspiration for Macbeth. See, this is why we have the phrase, "You can't control the seasons," because if you could, you may well be burned at the stake. This is History on Fleek, and we'll see you next time.